Osvaldo Gimenez, Chief Product Officer at Mercado Pago and Mercado Livre, platforms that have transformed the way millions of people buy, sell, and move money on the continent. With a degree in economics from the University of Buenos Aires and a master's degree from Stanford University, Osvaldo combines analytical vision and product sensitivity like few others. He has been with Mercado Livre since 2003 and is one of the people responsible for its consolidation as one of the most influential technology companies in the Southern Hemisphere. A reference in innovation, leadership, and social impact through digital, Osvaldo has built a solid, discreet, and deeply transformative career.
Welcome to an incredible episode here of Finance of Tomorrow, the podcast, in partnership with central banks across the world. We bring the greatest leaders shaping and innovating from Latin America to the world. And I couldn't be happier to meet one of the household brands trying to compete with casually 6 vertical giant categories when it comes to providing value for human beings and companies around the world. Let me introduce you, Osvaldo Gimenez. Osvaldo, please welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Bianca. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell me a little bit about the story of Osvaldo before we get to talk about Mercado Livre.
Wow, I've been with Mercado Livre for a very long time. So my story of Osvaldo before doing Mercado Livre, originally an industrial engineer. I did consulting throughout Latin America with a firm that was called Booz Allen and Hamilton, mostly based out of Buenos Aires, but spending a lot of time in Sao Paulo and throughout the region. And then went to business school, Stanford. And then there I met Marcos Galperin, who would later start Mercado Livre. And I joined him a few months later when we were still at the garage, basically in the very early days of Mercado Livre. That was very early, the end of 99, beginning of 2000.
Wow. What was that like? Did you get a feeling you would be here right now?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not for several reasons. First of all, we never thought, we always knew it was a marathon, but we are 25 years into a marathon, so it was longer than the 42 kilometers we expected. And the other thing, back then, we were thinking of, we wanted to lead the technology revolution in Latin America, but our goal at that point in time was to build the largest marketplace in Latin America, which we did. But we were not thinking, I think we're not thinking of the impact we would have on the Fintech side yet. Fintech was not even evolved yet.
And at the time, what were you trying to do? I think when we read back to the beginnings of Mercado Livre, we had this equivalency because, we tend to do this in Latin America. We compare ourselves to our US equivalent of an eBay. So the beginning was about movement and transporting and connecting people to things. Bring me back to those roots in those garage days. And then let's talk through this evolution, which is the insanity payments in Latin America.
Absolutely. So very early days, we were trying to replicate what eBay was doing in the US. eBay was probably the most successful internet company back in 99. They were public already. They were making money. So we wanted to replicate auctions in Latin America. There were many people trying to do the same thing as we were throughout the region, but we wanted to do auctions and to be the king, if you want, of the marketplace of auctions. Sometime later, we realized several things. And initially, let me go back for a second. Initially, auctions meant we were really hands off. We did not touch the payment. We did not touch the good. So we were just putting together buyer and seller, connecting the parts. And what we soon realized,
right? I don't know what we're
not Fintech, but yeah. It was really a marketplace. Later on we called it an enhanced marketplace when we started doing all of the things you do around the marketplace, such as fulfillment and payments and so on, and credits and so on. But initially it was just putting buyers and sellers in contact, and through an auction system, which we soon realized did not make a lot of sense in Latin America because eBay always said we make inefficient markets efficient. That was a claim. And that was the same case in Latin America. However, markets back then in Latin America were significantly more inefficient. So there was a huge opportunity, not only for auctions, which typically are for used items, but really for new in-season items. and to replicate more of the Amazon model than the eBay model. And fortunately, we were quick to realize that, and we started offering. We forgot about auctions, and we're really going for a pure marketplace, but more of a fixed price and new in-season items early on. I would say within 1 or 2 years that since we had launched.
And then in that evolution, did you always set out, like today you operate in 8 countries?
Mercado Pago operates in 8 countries. Mercado Livre operates throughout the region. It's more like 13 countries.
Wow.
But early on, well, we started in Argentina, and early on we realized that we needed to have a regional play. So within 6 months, we had Mercado Libre in Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Colombia, and Uruguay. That was within 6 months. So we used to joke that we were a multinational startup.
Yeah, that is unheard of, actually. Like operating in that
Yeah.
many countries, and people think that like the culture could not be more different, the central bank could not be more different. So how was that like, actually?
It was quite challenging to be able to we did not have scale yet, and to be able to put together a team.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about culture, but to have the same culture within the company early on, where we were working, I don't know, thousands of miles from each other, that was quite challenging. One thing we relied on is several of us had gone to business school at Stanford, and so we ended up also hiring people in Brazil, in Mexico, in Colombia, and so on, who had exactly the same background. And at least we had a common language and a common set of culture that we had all of us learned at Stanford.
So let's talk about that. What was some of the biggest challenges beyond culture, and how did you overcome that? You talked about, you had a framework, you had a set of values and culture that school and a process puts you through. How has that shaped Mercado Libre when you look back?
Oh, I think that has had a tremendous impact on Mercado Libre. Basically, much later on, we tried to codify that in what we call the DNA of Mercado Libre. We did that, but initially it had all to do with being entrepreneurial, to be willing to take risks, to be always thinking of the customer first, to be in what we call continuous beta. Whatever we do is better. We want to improve on it. And whenever we have been doing something in the same way for a long time, we know that it's time to change. Because surely with new technology, surely there is a more efficient or better way to do what we were already doing. So all of those things were there from the beginning. Obviously, the challenges were quite different at each of the stages we were at. Initially, the big challenge was to be able to gain scale, to be able to convince people who remember back 25 years ago in Latin America, probably less than 5% of the population had access to the web. So we had to find those users and convince them that it was safe to buy and sell stuff on the web. And that was the initial challenge we faced. And then also early in our life, we had the huge dot-com bubble and dot-com crash in early 2001. 2000 and 2001. So we had to be able to survive that and be able to scale when all of a sudden there was no more funding available for internet companies in the region.
I find that really interesting about your history as you look at the companies you've acquired, the territories you've taken over, and really the depth of your service. As you said, from, being the best auction to realizing how is just the best connection, marketplace, and service. Like this entrepreneurial mindset of being better has driven you to build some of the best customer experiences seen out there, where the challenge of what you said, the balancing act of security and convenience in a world where we know that first, hey, I don't even know what that is, and second, then when I do, I expect it yesterday. So how has that entrepreneurial culture, and what are some of the technologies that you have been able to take advantage across the years? Because I'm sure you have such an interesting perspective of looking back between the buzzword bingo across the decades, right?
Yeah, and I would say that we definitely learned a lot from what was going on in different parts of the world. We realized, as we mentioned, we realized soon that fixed price was better than auctions for Latin America. We also realized, we saw what was happening in the US with the war between Amazon and eBay. And we realized that we had to go head on into payments and head on into fulfillment.
Okay.
Those were two things that when we started, we didn't know how to do. So we tried to learn from the best in
It's
the
not a
world.
small thing to do. Payments is
No,
not
no,
simple.
neither fulfillments nor payments is easy.
Yeah.
We were happy. We were, if you want, we were lucky back in the early days. eBay was an investor in Mercado Livre. They acquired 19% of Mercado Livre, so we had good access to PayPal. And we in the early days we learned a lot from what PayPal was doing together with eBay. Early days, I mean 2004, 2003. And that got us started with payments. Then we evolved significantly from there. And also at some point we realized that we needed to have this fulfillment network. And so we also started building a fulfillment network and hiring people who had done it before in different parts of the world and could teach us the best way to build that in a region that has its challenges because of the sizes we have and the distances between a city and another city in Brazil or Mexico or all over Latin America, I would say.
Yeah, people often forget that it's a bit more than just like this size of Earth and a lot of challenges around even just infrastructure. You said it before, but unfortunately, we still know that the reality resides on people's access to internet, infrastructure. How have you worked around that challenge, that just harsh reality of accessibility in Latin America?
Well, it has evolved a lot since we got started. Remember, it was very small initially. And the other thing that happened that really accelerated change was the introduction of smartphones. Initially, all of the people were connecting through desktops or laptops. And then the iPhone and Android came along, and we saw a huge acceleration in the region of access to the web. So that definitely has changed quite a bit in the last decade and a half. And that has also had a huge impact on the way we do business because on the one hand, on the marketplace side, if you want, we change platform, but the business is similar if you want, in the sense that you were buying something on a computer and now you're buying it on a phone. But now for the fintech side of the business, it allowed us to go beyond online into offline. So initially we could only process payments for e-commerce or for online payments, but with everybody having a computer in their pocket, eventually we were able to reach stores and have people pay with a wallet or with MPOSs or POSs or whatnot. So it really hugely increased our addressable market and what transactions we could be part of with Mercado Pago.
And how do you see that evolution going to next? When you look at where you brought value, you just described so eloquently like the increase on the supply chain of value that you provided effectively to your end client, right? You started saying, I could do POS, I could do stores, I could do this thing, I could take advantage of these catalysts. In today's world where we talk about AI being a catalyst, even though, as a computer scientist and a mathematician, we all know that models have existed for years. And this is just a nice branding on some computational ability. How have you managed this transition? Like the technologies have just gone crazier and crazier, faster and faster. And I think COVID-19 pandemic taught us a bit of a lesson and in speed. And I think these numbers show in your numbers and what you saw happen in Latin America and your growth.
I would say that for us, this has been sort of, there's a phrase I like to repeat a lot, that is that opportunities multiply when you seize them. So whenever you seize an opportunity, you have other opportunities coming along, and that has been exactly what happened to us. It's like this game of doors, and you open a door, and behind each door there are two doors, and you open another one, and there are another two doors. It has been really, I like Borges quite a lot. It's really been forking paths, basically. And we started, let me summarize quickly what we did on the fintech side, because we talked a lot about the marketplace already. So we started trying to solve the problem within Mercado Libre, for users to be able to pay merchants within Mercado Libre. Then we went online outside of Mercado Libre. And then, as I mentioned, the iPhone came along and Android came along, and we realized we had a huge opportunity to process payments in-store, basically. We started with POSs, and then we saw what was happening in China with QR codes, and we launched QR codes in Argentina, and that really took off. And we were doing the same in Brazil, but then Pix came along, and that really took off too, and has been huge. And then we went into credits to merchants, credits to consumers. We launched debit cards, we launched credit cards, we launched investment products, and also insurtech products. So what we realized is that we were able to use technology and leverage technology to be able to, we like it to call it, to democratize or to basically to facilitate access to financial products throughout the region. It's a region with over 650 million people, where many of those did not have access in the past to financial products. And now they do, just because the cost of reaching them is significantly smaller thanks to technology. So that has been quite an evolution. And as you mentioned, COVID also worked as a catalyst, if you want, because many people who in the past had not tried e-commerce had to try it for the first time during COVID. And once they tried it and it worked fine, they stick to it. And the same thing happened with electronic payments. People probably were not as willing to handle cash because it could be dangerous in the early days of COVID. And so they got to try financial products. Also, in some countries, bank branches were in Argentina, they were closed for nearly 9 months. And people were totally able to survive without going to a branch, and then realized that they could use fintechs and wallets and whatnot, and they did not need a branch. So each of these things have built upon what we do and enable us to grow. As you say, we are very excited with AI. Yes, we have been using machine learning for, I don't know, over 10 years now for fraud prevention and so on. But LLMs really also bring something new to the table. And we're already using it extensively. And we are very excited with how the third wave, we started with internet, then we came mobile, and now AI will also facilitate growth in the next few years.
So much to unpack there, Osvaldo. I have a few questions. When you saw this change in what you could mean to your customer, to your end client, I'm one that always talks about, I personally believe that the financial services industry at large has done a lot for humanity, but has also been a really crappy listener. When we look at even how we looked at data and how financial institutions, know their client, but then you look at companies like yourself that have always been looking and focusing on how do I derive value, and then can I go into here, and then can I go into here, and can I go into here? And now all of a sudden you have the ability of actually sitting on a data lake, not what I like to call a swamp, which is what most financial institutions end up having as they've lived in silos around their customers. You've looked at this and said, okay, how do I build value to small and medium-sized enterprises, which represent, 60% of some of these economies, and we're talking about 650 million people. That's what people often don't say. That's why I'm super proud to be Latin and often say, in a time where geopolitics looks a little interesting, this is actually a huge opportunity. How is Mercado Livre taking that on?
I believe the opportunity is huge. We believe the opportunity continues to be huge. And on the Mercado Pago side, as you mentioned, there were lots of people who were underserved.
Yeah.
And basically what we have always been obsessed with customer centricity. And the way we do that is by focusing on NPS, Net Promoter Scores. And we have been tracking Net Promoter Scores, I would say, for a long time, both on the individual side and on the merchant side, and continuously tickling with that and saying, okay, what are people complaining about? What kind of products do they need? What are the main drivers for people to use us more often, to use us as their principal account, and really tweaking and launching new products, I would say, every quarter or every 2 quarters that are trying to address those specific needs of customers. So really listening very, very closely to customers. And again, given that we work mostly with technology, we have a lower cost to serve than many more traditional financial institutions, and therefore are able to offer conditions that some other people can't or won't. For me, a typical example is what happens with what we call in Brazil conta turbinada, or it's basically a yielding account. Traditionally, banks in Latin America, in most countries where you have a savings account, you don't get paid anything, despite having countries where inflation is high or very high, as in the case of what used to be in Argentina. And basically, most banks were paying you zero for having assets in those accounts. And we changed that. And the way we changed that was basically in countries where we had to, we associated with somebody who was running a money market fund, and we would swipe the funds people would deposit with us to the money market fund in a way that they are available 24/7. And they yield something that is very in line with what inflation is or what the risk-free rate is in each of those countries. And that was a super strong, pretty basic, but a super strong innovation for Latin America, because up until now, many small savers did not have basically the opportunity to save, and they were losing versus inflation every month. And we changed that, and in a significant way. We have tens of millions of people doing this with us throughout the region.
Working with tens of billions of people, releasing products every quarter, every 2 quarters, you have to have had an entrepreneurial setup, like you mentioned, of partnering, building, buying. How has that been in the, not just only, you've spoken a little bit about the architecture, you're not sitting there on Cobalt, and we're not sitting on mainframe and some of the things that have impeded data models to even take place, or efficiencies or opportunities to, as you said, lower cost to service. When you have a lower cost to service, you can provide different types of products. And in the market like this, that we know it's underserved, and in a place where, finance has only reached not even 60% of economic activity worldwide. And when we look at the opportunity of where payments really is, like, where is value creation when it comes to data, it's much more. Like, I've often been saying for the past decade to banks as a digital identity expert that, you're much more the transaction pipe. We're custodians here of something that's extremely precious. It comes in the form of data, in the form of products, in the form of payments, but it has an insane meaning in economic value, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
How do you look at that? How do you look at that future of, like, what role are you going to play in the lives of those 650 million people?
Yeah, I would say close to 10% of those use Mercado Pago every month. We have over 65 million monthly active users, and a large proportion of those use us every day. So definitely they are relying on us. They have forgot their wallet and they need to pay with their phone. They want to collect funds for their small business or whatnot. There are many different situations, and definitely this has required a lot of investment in technology. We have Mercado Livre probably has one of the largest, if not the largest, IT team in Latin America. We have in total 18,000 engineers in between all of Mercado Libre.
Wow. So spread all around Latin America, Osvaldo, or all around the world? Okay, wow.
Yes, it's spread mostly Latin America. Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Colombia, and Uruguay, I would say, are the main hubs. Chile too. So mostly throughout Latin America. A few of them are outside of the region, but the vast majority are within the region. Okay. And we have had to reinvent ourselves many times. We have had to basically to scrap and write all of our code from scratch again and again and again. We have done this several times throughout history. It's something that when we tell this story, many people look shocked that we had to write all of our code. But basically,
I have to admit, I don't look shocked that you had to write all your code. I'm just look shocked that you don't look like you have PST. That you're still smiling and carrying around, because I'm sure this was not an easy task.
In order to scale, when we started, we were really little in a garage, basically. So as we scale, technology have changed so many times. We went to having a central database, to having a widespread database, to moving to the cloud, to use different providers in the cloud and so on and so forth. Technology has changed so much that in order to, and also the scale of our business has changed so much that in able to provide a fast response, we have had many times to optimize and basically to rewrite most of our code. So it has been, I would say, very challenging. We have a very good team. And I think that is one of the advantages we have versus probably people who do not own their code or do not own their own developers and have to rely on third parties or a banking core that was made by somebody else that they need to adapt. It's very hard to have that flexibility. That's why I would say the vast majority of our code was written in-house by ourselves.
Wow. So how are you using, are you starting to see some of the cool efficiencies that I've been seeing in technology companies and interesting institutions across the world is the acceptance of obviously AI tools in code and in development teams, a lot more, less doomsday-like than what people like. We all know that the media likes, sad stories make the news and scary stories make the news. So we've been running around, at least in my personal humble opinion, asking the wrong question when it comes to AI, talking about it being something that's going to make you fire those people. And the nice conversation I usually like to have, at least as a UNESCO council member, is to say, hey guys, what if we were asking the wrong question? What if AI was here to just allow us to do better continuously and to be better? Nobody said we needed to work 17 hours a day in this way and be Zoom like zombies on our phones. So maybe how do you look at that culturally, internally, with this spirit of always changing? I'm curious.
I believe the opportunity we have is huge. It's huge in a way that is more smart, to work in a way in which we can roll out products faster and serve a larger base of customers and serve them in a better way. We're deploying AI in many different ways. One is the one you mentioned, to build better code and to build code faster. We already have a very large team, but this enables us to make less mistakes and to write code faster. Also, we are using it front end already to address customer support contacts, and this enables us to provide faster response, more accurate response, because we compared those that were done before. In many cases, people who are providing customer support it's very challenging given the size Mercado Livre and Mercado Pago already has. And so with AI, we can really either answer the questions by automatically or also help them a lot, provide a better response. When you are an agent and you get a case that has had 2 or 3 back and forth and you need to read all of the case, that will take you probably 15 minutes. And if AI can really summarize the case for you and bring what is the problem that has not been resolved yet, you are more effective and you're able to provide a faster response. And that is just the beginning. I believe that we have a huge opportunity with AI in Latin America. One of the challenges I see is a significant lack of financial education in Latin America. And it happens all over the world, but probably it's more acute in the region. And that is something that is very, very difficult to address from one day to the next. It's something that takes time. You have to teach people how to calculate something as basic as interest rates in some cases. So if you really have an agent that can help you explain what are the alternatives, what looks best for you, and is really an agent that is concerned with your welfare and trying to make a decision, help you make a decision, that is something that we are striving to build. We are already starting to build, and we believe this is a huge opportunity for the region.
I couldn't agree more. I like to imagine a world where you could really be what I mentioned around being a bad listener. Data allows you to tell stories. And if clients can trust a platform and feel heard and feel seen, I've been around some of the most rural areas myself around Latin America and the world. And when you see the relationship of this bank or this money thing, we've really messed this up. And we like speaking acronyms and complicated. And we couldn't be furthest from close to the average person. And when you look at Latin America, I think Latin America teaches us a lesson on this, not only on payments like QR codes and Pix, but also on crypto. That people say, okay, it's complicated, but if there is an opportunity and I can see the money, I'm going to try. There is a land of maybe we had less, or maybe we do more with less, I'd like to say. And what has that been? You've also taken a huge leap role across Latin America on the acceptance and the movement of this, which is, to me, we all know the whole world is going to be tokenized. We produce data more than we produce anything in the planet. And I often like talking about, the store of value is going to be many. Crypto is one of the paths, and you've taken a leadership role. So tell me a little bit about what was the attitude on that, and how have you seen this create opportunity?
We have been involved with crypto for some time now.
Yeah.
Basically, the idea originally has been to experiment, to learn and see where we see opportunities. The first thing we did was a pretty basic one. We connected our wallet to exchanges so that you are able to buy, hold, and sell some of the typical, Bitcoin, ETH, and a few stable coins in each country. And we have been doing that for several years now. But last year, we did something that is probably more exciting. We launched our own stablecoin.
Yeah.
And the way we did is we launched a stablecoin. It's called Meli Dollar. And we are initially using it as part of our loyalty program, which is called Meli Plus or Meli Mais. And basically, whenever you buy something on the marketplace in Brazil or in Mexico or other countries where this is already launched, you get a cashback in Meli dollars. And you are able to hold that, to spend that. And basically, we will continue adding use cases. You can buy something on Mercado Livre or pay something with Mercado Pago and then pay with Meli Dollar. But we believe there is a huge opportunity to grow that. I would say cross-border payments are still expensive throughout the region, and that could be an enabler.
Expensive. We're talking I think I did a transaction yesterday and sent somebody a print screen talking about exactly that. It was like 16%. I think it was a Danish krona to a Brazilian real to buy in a POS machine. So that is amazing. Where are you in the adoption scale of the stablecoin today, Osvaldo? And this is to me one of the most interesting use cases, because the unit economics start to make sense. And when we look at old loyalty schemes and old liquidity pools and risk management of all of this was hard and complicated. This is an opportunity for a different unit economics.
Yeah, we're still early on. We just rolled this out a few quarters ago, initially in Brazil, then went to Mexico and then other countries. So we're still early on. People have been accumulating in most cases. Some people have been buying Meli Dollar. You can also buy it on our platform. People have been redeeming it, but for the most part, they have been storing it. And it's an alternative. It's a token that is basically equivalent to USD. So you don't have if you want a Latin America devaluation risk on it, and people are able to store it and save on it or then transfer it. And ideally, the idea is later on, it will facilitate, for example, cross-border transactions from one country to another in the region, which are still fairly small, but we believe we'll have an opportunity to grow quite a bit.
I couldn't agree more. I'm excited, and I will be able to try to get to for another interview to get an update on how this is going. As you know, between this 45 minutes we spent together, I'm sure there's 7 executive orders telling us that Cryptopia is coming, which is kind of, to me, very interesting and an interesting place to be. I can't help but to ask you, Osvaldo, what has been some of the greatest challenge you've had as a leader, as a person, as a leader growing this organization? I often try to get leaders to be a little bit more of a humble pie in this episode and say, hey, it can't be easy to deal with all these countries and all this technology and all these legislations and all these central banks. How have you been, doing better as a leader throughout this entire journey from garage to, casual unicorn, ginormous company taking over the planet, hopefully? Would like to see a Latin giant.
Yeah, I would say that on the one hand, looking internally, definitely maintaining the culture has been a challenge. And when we started, we were a bunch of people. We were having lunch together. We all saw each other or met for retreats. Today, we are, over 70,000 people in Mercado Livre. So it's a challenge to be able to maintain culture. And we have been doing a lot of things to do that, basically to make a culture part of our everyday life. We have, created, as I mentioned, all of these DNA premises of what is Mercado Libre, and then we have included that into hiring decision, into firing decisions, and also into performance review decisions. So in every performance review, we will evaluate people not only on how they get things done, on what they do, but also on how they do it, and if that is according to our culture. And that definitely has been a big part of the challenge. Another challenge has been, as you mentioned, when we started Mercado Pago in 2003. And Fintech was not a word. We were unregulated in every country where we operate. Today, we are regulated in every country where we operate. So definitely we have had to create a lot of compliance mechanisms and to comply with all of the regulations for each of the different licenses we have in each of the countries where we operate, and that also has been challenging. And then the other part is the other big challenge, I would say, is people decisions. We have built a fantastic team, I believe, but as you scale, you need to have at each point in time the best people you can get for each of those positions. Definitely, it's different when we are 50 people than when we are 5,000 or 50,000, basically. So we have been able to attract a lot of good talent in Latin America. There's a lot of very, very good talent, but it has been quite a challenge to do that and to attract and retain them.
When you look at Latin America, we know that talent is a challenge. You talked about the talent from the bottom side of the scale, about the necessity for basic education so we can have financial education. I often tell people, like, they're still hungry and without a roof on their head, it's going to be a little challenging to care about your whatever product. And Latin America has seen this, but we also have an incredible opportunity. 650 million people, you have 70,000 of them, and into growing. How do you look at upskilling Latin America, and how do you see, in a time with such change and such geopolitical distress, this is an opportunity?
I'm super optimistic about Latin America, and I'm super optimistic about the changes and changing attitudes I've seen in the region since we started. Mercado Libre was the first ever Latin American company to go public in Nasdaq. You have had several of those since then, and that definitely has been a change in attitude. When we started, Endeavor was only getting started in the region, and now you go to an Endeavor Day in each of the countries where we operate, and it's thousands of people. So I would say that there's a significantly larger interest in technology, significantly larger interest in becoming an entrepreneur. That has been quite a significant change in culture, I would say. But there's still a lot to be done. I'd love to see more engineers graduating in each of the countries in Latin America. When you compare percentage of people graduating with a STEM degree in Latin America, you compare that to India or China, you see the opportunity is huge. I'd like to double the number of engineers we have. And in some cases, in some states or in some countries, given the amount of people we hire year after year, part of the reason we have to diversify and go into more countries is because there is not enough supply of engineers, and definitely that should and could change.
I agree. That's a lot of the work here we're doing in Finance of Tomorrow, is breaking down some of the jargon and difficulties and conversations and barriers, first between regulators, so the guys and gals writing the rules can talk to each other, instead of just having us build too many compliance departments to be able to translate them and operate in a world where, we all learned that digital boundaries don't really exist. And we all know that we're connected as people and as a planet. So it's really amazing and inspiring to hearing you say and have the pride to build capacity. I think that's what Finance of Tomorrow is about. That's why we wanted to tell your story. I'm so grateful that you were here, and that I'm excited to see what's going to come next. You've been buying, selling, changing companies, getting licenses, and hopefully we'll be able to have a conversation in an in-depth chat with some of the compliance leaders in your team about, the nuances of all this work and how it's been challenging. But Osvaldo, it's been just so lovely to have this conversation with you.
Thank you, Bianca, so much. It's been a pleasure being here and really enjoyed our conversation a lot.
Osvaldo, if you have 1 minute before I let you go on time, as I promised, the delightful EA you have. I always like getting a little personal and asking you to leave somebody with a piece of advice. As you said, I left my country in Rio, in Brazil, 17, and I did not get to where I am without a lot of people helping me and giving me a boatload of advice and open doors. And I'm sure your journey, you spoke about it in the beginning of the episode, has been similar and the same. Every door you open and follow through with integrity and intention opens thousands of more doors. So, what advice would you like to leave to people that look at you and go, wow, that's a crazy career? Like, this guy's over here, I'm down here. Like, how can I ever get there? Like, and I'm sure when you look yourself in the mirror, you're still the guy that was in the garage at one point. So, what advice maybe you would have either for him or for others that are looking up at your story and wanting to make that their story of tomorrow?
I think there could be many different things, but I always say that if I try to summarize something that was probably, we were brainwashed when we were at Stanford,
Okay.
and we were brainwashed into realizing that the glass is half full. That is so important in life, to really see, whenever you see something, obviously you can see the bad side of it, but you can also see the opportunity in it, and really focus on that opportunity, because the glass, you have to see it half full, and there are opportunities. There are always opportunities everywhere. You have to be willing to take risks, and to take risks means to be willing to fail. Failure is okay. There's something that is important in Silicon Valley, and that we try to bring that to Latin America, is failure is okay. When you are trying to do something that has not been done before, for some reason it has not been done before. It's because it's risky, because you may fail. You may fail. That's okay. Go fail, learn from it, try again. Probably the only time you are not allowed to fail is the last time you try something.
Well, with that, we will share the story of Mercado Livre, Mercado Pago, and all the many lives you've impacted and changed. Thank you so much for being part of Finance of Tomorrow and helping us build a tomorrow that we can all be very proud and included about. So thank you so much for being here.